Awesome. All right. So thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Like I said, my name is Tolu, and I am with the developer relations team over at Paystack. Today's session is going to be, so it's our developer workshop series, and it's just a series of webinars aimed at showing developers how they can build products using Paystack's APIs. So in each episode, or each session, we'll just have a different topic and we'll talk about how Paystack can help you build for that particular topic or that particular type of app. And we'll go through some live code, show you how something that we've put together that kind of demonstrates how you might go about architecting your own solutions. And then, of course, at the end of the session, we'll make time for Q&A and everything. So let me go ahead and share my presentation. Just give me a moment. All right. I'll just give us a moment. It looks like Livestorm is taking a bit of time to load the media. Okay, here we go. All right, so we should be able to see my slides now. Can I get just another confirmation if we can see the slides? Yep, okay, awesome, fantastic. All right, so like I said, it's our developer workshop series, and today's topic is recurring payments and subscription billing with Paystack. So to get us started, we have our agenda, and I'll just go through that very quickly just to let you know everything that we'll be covering, so you have an idea of what the session will be like. So we'll be covering what recurring payments are. We'll talk about that just very briefly, and then we'll get straight into the good stuff. So I'll show you how you can implement recurring payments using Paystack. For this part, we'll just do a quick demo with Postman. If you're not familiar with Postman, it's just a simple tool that lets you test out APIs. So you can test making API calls, you can set up mock servers so that you can test your own integrations and stuff like that. So very, very handy tool for learning how to use a given company or platform's API. So we'll do that demo, and then we'll go into talking about subscriptions. And so we'll talk about subscription billing with Paystack, and there I have another demo, this time a small application that I've put together just to demonstrate how Paystack's subscriptions API works. After that, we'll spend some more time talking about subscriptions, best practices, and understanding subscription statuses. This is something that's very important if you are managing your subscriptions with Paystack. So we'll cover the everything you would need to know basically to manage your Paystack subscriptions. After that, we'll just spend a little time recapping everything that we've gone over, and we will then throw the floor open for Q&A. So for Q&A, I want to go over the Livestorm interface and let you know how you can ask your questions. So if you look at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you should see a questions tab right next to chat. If you have questions, you can use this. We prefer that you use this to ask your questions. This is because it lets us then, we can post the question on screen and answer it live during the Q&A session at the end. So yeah, feel free to use that to ask your questions. I also have my colleague Andrew who's in the chat, and so he'll, if there's something I talk about that there's a link to share, he'll share a link, or if anyone asks any questions in the chat, he'll be on hand to help out. All right, so let's get into it. What are recurring payments? Put very simply, recurring payments are a payment model that allow customers to authorize a merchant to pull funds from their account automatically at a regular interval or whatever interval they would like for the goods and services that are being provided to them. So traditional payment, you pay one time and that's it. You've bought your good or your service, and if you want to buy it again, you go through the same process of paying for it, sharing your card details or whatever payment method you might have used. With recurring payments, you are paying for a good or a service, but on a recurring basis. So imagine you are paying for a cable subscription or a monthly internet subscription or something like that, where every month you're supposed to pay, or every year you're supposed to pay, or every quarter you're supposed to pay. Recurring payments are simply that. It's payments that you make on some sort of schedule. And so with Paystack, we will talk about how recurring payments work with Paystack now. With Paystack, there's four very, I guess, straightforward steps to implementing this. So the first step is that you charge the card. And remember, like we said, for regular payments or for any type of payment, this is going to be your first step. You charge the payment instrument, right? With Paystack, what we then do is we have something that we call a card authorization. This is something that identifies the card that you used to make your payment. And so once you've done that, once you've made the payment, we return the card authorization, and you can use this card authorization to then make payments or charge that customer in the future. So I'll slow down a bit here, and just to make sure I have everyone on board, I'm going to go over to our documentation now. So let me share the link in the chat just in case anyone wants to check it out. Oh, Andrew beat me to the punch, but I've gone ahead to share it as well. So the steps that I'm talking about are on this page. So we'll walk through them slowly so that we can all make sure that everybody gets it. Let me see if I can share that tab of my screen, and we'll walk through it together. All right, just a heads up that I am now looking at the documentation as opposed to the Livestorm screen. So in case there's anything in the chat, Andrew will help me get to it. I'm looking at the same screen you are, so I might not see your messages immediately. Although actually, before I get started, can everyone see the documentation page all right, or do I need to zoom in? This time I am looking at the chat, so I will be able to see if you say I should zoom in. It's good? Okay. All right. Fantastic. Okay. So yes, recurring charges, recurring payments. Basically, you charge a customer the first time. Once that payment is successful, you can then store the authorization that I spoke about and use it for subsequent transactions. Key point to highlight, on Paystack, this currently only works for card. So we're only able to do recurring transactions for cards on Paystack at the moment. This is something that we would like to offer on multiple payment methods, but it is easiest on card. And I feel you will find on most places that you're doing recurring payments, card will generally be the accepted payment method. All right, so walking through the steps, like we said, the first thing is to make the first transaction. And so you can do this by, on Paystack, initializing the charge from either your web app or your mobile app. When you make this charge, in the response from Paystack after the card has been charged, there are a number of things that we return about the transaction, right? So we let you know the status of the transaction, the customer who made the transaction, but there's also another object which we display here that we call the authorization. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this because this is the most important part of this process for doing recurring payments on Paystack. So the authorization object contains information about the card that was used to make the payment. And so in this case, you can see there are a few parameters here that we have, and this is all returned. So if you do a transaction on Paystack and then we send you a webhook with information about the transaction, or you call the verified transaction endpoint, you'll be able to see all of this. And don't worry, I'll walk through all of this in Postman after I've talked through it. So we'll be able to put practice to what we've discussed. All right, so looking at our authorization object here, there's some things that I'm sure just by looking at them, you can tell what they do, but we'll still walk through everything one by one. First off, we have the authorization code. And this is the money for us. This is actually what's going to be most important for us in doing recurring payments with Paystack. So we'll come back to that and talk about it some more. But basically, every time you charge a card, we will return a unique authorization code if the card was charged successfully. The rest of the authorization object has just information about the card that was used to make the payment. So you can see we have the card type here, it's Visa. we return the last four on the card. We give you the expiry month as well as the expiry year of the card. We give you the BIN as well. So the BIN is the first 6 digits on the card. So between the BIN and the last four, you get the first 6 digits and then the last 4 digits of the card. We'll also let you know the bank that issued the card. In this case, because this was a test transaction, it's just test bank. Channel here specifies what payment channel was used to make this payment. So I guess I should highlight that if I had made this payment not using a card, I would still get an authorization object, right? But the contents of the authorization object would be different. If I paid via a bank transfer or EFT or USSD or QR, obviously there would be no card type, there would be no last four because those are not card methods. So for any of those, if you notice that those are missing and then you check channel, you might find that it's a channel other than card. But if channel is card, then you should expect to see all that other information included as well. We also have a signature here, which is another unique identifier. In the same way that we have the authorization code, we have the signature, which is a unique identifier for the card that's being used. And there's some more information here. Let me just scroll down to it. So new authorization codes are created each time a card is used, but the card's signature will remain the same. So that's important to note. Basically, I can do multiple transactions, or I can charge a card multiple times, and each time I get the verified transaction response or the charge.success webhook from Paystack, it will contain a different authorization code specific to that transaction that just happened. However, if I've been using the same card for all those transactions, then I should expect that the signature is the same. So think of the signature as the fingerprint for that card, if you will. Another important parameter that's returned here is the reusable flag. So reusable, as the name might suggest, indicates that this card or this payment instrument, because remember, the authorization could be returned for non-card payment methods as well. But this flag is just meant to indicate that, yes, this is reusable and it can subsequently be used for recurring payments or card not present transactions. We also include the country code just to let you know what country the card was issued in. And then there's an account name parameter that will contain the name of the account holder. Apologies. Okay, so that's what our authorization object looks like. And like I said, we're going to find that this authorization code bit here is very important for us. So once we've gotten that authorization, what do we do then? Well, the authorization code is what lets us charge the card without a customer needing to present their card details again. So what we want to do is call Paystack, passing this authorization code and using it to conduct the recurring transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Postman now so that I can show some of this and maybe it will make a little more sense than me just talking. So let me stop sharing the documentation here. And remember, if you have questions, remember, if in case anybody just joined, you can ask questions in the questions tab, and Andrew will either answer as you share your questions there, or we'll save the questions for the end of the session where I will take them live. Oh, apologies, Cornelia. I'm just saying you had asked if I could zoom in. I'll make sure that if I'm displaying more content on the screen, I'll try and zoom in. So I have Postman open here, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to that window now. Just give me one moment. All right. Sorry, Livestorm is a little funky with its window sharing, so you have to jump back and forth between things. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share Postman. Okay. So again, I'm looking at the Postman window. I will try and jump back and forth just so I make sure I'm not missing anybody's questions or if anybody can't see anything. But if you do ask something or point something out and I don't respond immediately, it's just because I can't see the chat at the moment. All right, let's go. I'm going to start by initializing a transaction. And so I have base URL here, which is just Paystack's base URL. I've saved it as a variable in Postman because it just makes it easier for me to use. So we're calling the transaction initialize endpoint, and I'm passing an email and an amount. This is a very simple way to initialize a transaction on Paystack. So if your integration is server to server, as opposed to maybe a client side integration, then you can use this. You just call this endpoint from your server, like so, and this is the object that Paystack will return to you. So status true, we made the API call was successful, and the message says that an authorization URL has been created. So the authorization URL is what I use to actually conduct the transaction. You can see it here. It's a hosted page that Paystack has that has the checkout form where you can enter your card details and complete the transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and open this and switch windows again. Give me one moment. All right, let's disable the screen share. And I will share the checkout tab. All right, so this is the Paystack checkout, in case anyone is unfamiliar. You can see we have our payment channels on the left-hand side. I'm going to stick to card because like we've said here, this is a recurring payment, and we only have recurring payments for cards at the moment on Paystack. It's a test transaction, so I'm just going to go ahead and make it successful and pay 500. All right, so payments made, and now we're going to go back to Postman, so we can verify the transaction and we can get our authorization code that we need. Brutus, I just saw your question. It is possible to use the feature on a WordPress site. It will depend on the type of integration you're doing and the type of plugin that you might already be using. So if you're certain plugins, the plugin developer may have built-in functionality for recurring payments, while other plugin developers might not have. But then again, if you're integrating via the API, you can always do that integration yourself and enable recurring payments. But yes, it is possible on WordPress sites. Okay, so let's go back to Postman. And our transaction was successful, which is great. So we're going to grab the reference from that transaction, and we'll use that to verify the transaction. So verifying a transaction is just calling the Paystack API to say, hey, I initialized this transaction. Was it successful or not? Like, has the person paid? Was it successful? What other information can I get from that transaction? So this is the reference for the transaction we just completed. So when I make the call, I can see that indeed it was successful because we simulated a successful transaction. This is the amount that I paid. And we're going to scroll down. There's a lot of other information that we don't need right now, but this is what we need, the authorization. So we have our authorization object. We have all the parameters that I discussed earlier. And you can see I have my auth code, I have the BIN, I have the last four, when the card expires, so on and so forth. So like I said, the part that's important to us here is the authorization, namely the authorization code, this string right here. Now with this, I can go ahead and call another endpoint on Paystack's API that will let me charge this same card for this same customer, but without needing them to go through the flow that we just went through, where I had to go to the checkout and enter my card details. In this case, we just click the button, but normally I would have entered my card details there. So now we're using the charge authorization endpoint. It's transaction/charge authorization. You can see I have some dummy data from a previous transaction I did. So let's go ahead and change our authorization code here. We're going to change it to the code that we just got from the transaction that we verified. Important to note, you also need to pass the email that was used on the first transaction. And this is because the authorization code is tied to that email. So this is just to ensure the safety of your customers. Basically, you don't want the email is a unique identifier for your customer, and you don't want a different customer to use someone else's authorization code. You want to make sure that it's always the same customer that's being charged. So in this case, I have my email address. Let's make sure it was the same. Yes, that's the same email address we used when initializing the first transaction. and then I have the authorization code. I'm charging the same amount here, but just so we can see that it is actually different, let's go ahead and change that amount, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and send this to the Paystack API. And you'll see my response here is very different from what I got from initialized transaction. Initialized transaction gave me a URL to display for my customer to complete the transaction. With charge authorization, there's no need for that. And what actually just happens is that the charge is attempted immediately. So you can see here, charge attempted. And then here we can see status is success. So we were just able to successfully charge a card the first time, get the authorization code for that card that was used in the transaction, and then charge that same card a second time without needing anybody to enter card details. So this is very, very powerful for situations where you are selling a good or a service that you intend to sell on a recurring basis. It's a membership to a platform, or it's a subscription to a magazine, or something that you expect your customer to receive on a recurring basis. This lets you do that without having to, say, send them an email every month saying, oh, could you please enter your card details again so you can pay for this month? Rather, they just pay once and then you can collect your recurring revenue. Makes it super easy for you as a business owner, as a merchant, to collect payments from your customers and ensure that you have monthly recurring revenue. And it's also simple for your customers who don't have to repeatedly enter card information on your website. I feel like there are a few things now that annoy people more than, you've checked out on a website once, why do you have to enter all that same information all over again? So this makes it super simple, so you don't have to do that. All right, jumping back to Livestorm. Let me stop this share. Okay, so we've walked through implementing recurring payments, the standout steps that we need to know, and I just want to highlight again some of the flags that we showed you earlier, and some of the caveats to be aware of. So I'm going to go back to the documentation. All right, and just looking at the table of flags again, the important ones, again, authorization code. This is the code that is actually used to charge the card subsequently. So ideally, when you verify your transaction or you get your charge.success webhook, the authorization code is what you want to store, because that's what you will use to charge the customer subsequently. So if I weren't using Postman and I had a full application for doing what I just did, then after the transaction is successful and I've verified it, I would have a step where I save this to my DB. So ideally, I would save the customer's email address and then save their authorization code as well, so that I can charge them in the future. Another thing to be aware of is the reusable flag. So for us, it worked fine because we were using a reusable card. However, if you attempt to use a card that isn't reusable, you will get an error when you attempt to do the subsequent charge that will let you know that you've attempted this charge with a non-reusable card, and we won't be able to actually charge it subsequently. So those are the two standout fields, the two most important fields in the authorization object that you'll want to take note of. But what's also really cool about all the other information that we provide is that for your front end, it does let you do some pretty cool things. So now, imagine again that we have a full application. I can use these fields to suggest to my customer what card they should use to check out again. So imagine, let's say I run an online bookstore, for example, and a customer has checked out on my bookstore before, and they come back and they want to buy another book. If I've saved all this information, when they get to the checkout stage, I can suggest that they use a previously saved card, and I can show them, the authorization code, but they won't know what that means. They don't know what card that's for. But then I can use the card type and the last four and the expiration date, for example, things that as the card owner, I would probably know about, to indicate that, like, okay, yeah, you have a Visa card ending in 8081 that expires 12/23. And then I can look at that and say, oh yeah, that's my card. I'll go ahead and use that to complete the checkout. All right. So that's implementing recurring payments in a nutshell. We're now going to move on to, we did the Postman demo, to subscriptions. So similar to what we've already talked about, subscriptions are essentially recurring payments on a prefixed interval. So that's the big difference there is the prefixed interval. With the charge authorization endpoint that we looked at, you can create your own subscriptions billing platform or flow. In fact, at Paystack, it's the charge authorization that we use behind the scenes to power our subscriptions. It's the same authorization codes and everything that we're using to bill. The big difference is just that with if I were using the charge authorization endpoint alone, then it's up to me to set the interval for billing, as well as to ensure that if a charge is unsuccessful, I attempt the charge again, set my interval for when I'm going to bill people. So you ideally you would need like a cron job, for example, right, where you set it such that every week or every month or every year it attempts to call the charge authorization endpoint, passing the authorization code and email for a given customer. Subscriptions kind of take that overhead away for you and let you, at the time of the transaction, set an interval for billing the customer, set the amount that you want to bill the customer each time that you're billing, and then just sit back and let the money flow in. So let's dive into that and see how that works a bit. All right. So for subscriptions, we have three steps essentially. The first step is to create your plan. And so a plan is what defines the billing cycle, if you will. When you create a plan, you can give it a name, but you also specify the amount on that plan. So anybody subscribed to that plan, this is how much I want to charge them. And then you can also specify the interval for that plan. So anybody subscribed to that plan, this is how regularly I want to charge them. And then let me go ahead and share the subscriptions documentation in chat as well. So you can take a look at that if you want to as we go along here. But yes, so step one, we create our plan. Step two is then to subscribe a customer to that plan. So we've defined that, for example, say I am an ISP, I'm an internet service provider, and I have a plan for monthly subscriptions to my internet service. And so I can specify that every month I want to collect, say, 10,000 naira. Um, and that's essentially what I've used that plan to describe. So the interval is monthly, the amount is 10,000 naira, and then I can go ahead and give it a name like, monthly internet or something. That's a very boring name, but you get the drift. So yes, next step is you subscribe a customer to that plan. And then once that happens, Paystack takes care of all the logic of billing that customer every month. So you don't actually have to go in and say, oh, it's been a month since this customer subscribed. I need to trigger the next charge. No, Paystack takes care of triggering the charge and lets you know the status of triggering that charge. And finally, once you've set everything up, like I said, since Paystack is taking care of all the billing, what you want to then do is just listen for subscription events via webhooks that Paystack sends to you, and then manage any subscription issues that may arise. And we'll get into that more towards the end of the session. Oh, sorry. Okay, so here we're going to take a look at the sample application that I've set up for this. And it's just a very, very basic app that just shows us how we can get started with subscriptions on Paystack. So give me a minute. I'll need to switch screens again. All right. Oh wow! As usual, once you try and run a live demo, you start running into issues. Just give me a moment here. Great. So I think this is for Brutus's question earlier. Andrew has shared one of our plugins, the Woo Paystack plugin for WordPress. So if you're using WordPress and WooCommerce, you can implement subscriptions with that. Fun fact though, that doesn't actually use Paystack's recurring payments. It uses WooCommerce subscriptions. Oh, sorry, it doesn't use Paystack subscriptions. It uses WooCommerce subscriptions. Which under the hood will then use recurring payments for the billing cycle. All right, so my app is up now. Let me share that screen, or that tab, I should say. All right, so like I said, we just have a very basic app here. So imagine this is your sign-in page for your SaaS platform, right? And your customers will come here, or your users will come here and just enter their email. So I'm going to go ahead and enter mine. Actually, let's use a new one because I think I've used this one. Yeah, I've used quite a number. So let's see. I just want to make sure that this one doesn't already have a plan. Okay, perfect. So we've signed in, and now you can see that I'm being offered 2 plans. Now, these are both plans that I've set up on my Paystack dashboard. So let me take a small detour and just show you what those plans look like, just so that we can crystallize some of the things that we talked about around a plan. So let me switch. Perfect. All right. So now we're on my dashboard, and I'm going to go over to plans. You can see I have a number of plans here, but the 2 that we're looking at on our app are premium and basic. So let's click into premium here very quickly. And you can see I have the plan amount, the plan interval, max number of payments, number of subscriptions, total revenue generated on this plan, and the date that the plan was created. So this plan code is what's important for us right now. I've actually hard-coded the plan codes for this app, for the purposes of this app. Ideally, what you could have done here, say if I only had these 2 available plans, then I would have just made a call to Paystack, fetched my available plans, and displayed them. But for the purpose of this demo, I've just selected 2 of the plans, and I've hard-coded that so that they're the only 2 that show up here. So you can see we have our premium plan, access to everything on the basic plan, and then some. And then we have our basic plan, which is access to everything on the basic plan. Oh, wow. Very sorry. I just realized I was on the wrong screen. So yeah, like I said, premium plan here, 7,500 monthly. And then the basic plan here, 5,000 monthly. So switching back to our application, let's go ahead and choose the basic plan. I'm being a cheapskate today, and I don't feel like spending the extra money. And we're going to go ahead and subscribe to this plan. All right, so this kicks us over to the Paystack checkout. You'll see here that I only have card as a payment method this time, but you'll recall when I did the demo for the recurring payments, we saw all the available methods. However, since we know that card is the only available option for recurring payments / subscriptions, there's no need for us to show the rest of our payment methods. So in the code, which I will show after this, in the code, I've actually gone ahead to specify what payment channels I want to display and only display card to my customers. So we're displaying card. I will go ahead and simulate a success again. And boom, kicks me back to the dashboard. And you can now see some information about the plan that I just subscribed to. So hi, Tolu@testing.com. You're currently on the basic plan. Status is active. So that's the status of my subscription. And then card on file is a Visa card ending in 4081. That expires on December 2030. So not anytime soon. And then we also have information here on the next payment date. So everything I'm showing here is information that was returned from the Paystack API once I subscribed to that plan. And so you can see here that the next payment date for this plan is Friday, September 2nd, 2022. And this is because we're on a monthly plan. So let's dive into the code there very quickly, and I'll just explain some of what just happened. All right, sharing yet another screen. Apologies, have to do a lot of bouncing around. All right, where'd that window go? Okay, perfect. Here we are. So just a heads up once again, I'm looking at VS Code, so I can't see the chat in case anyone is sharing anything. So starting from our login page, this is just a bunch of boilerplate code. I just have some CSS I included at the top, some Bootstrap and stuff. But this was just our simple login page. What we did here was to mock, let me go to the JS file. So when somebody enters their email address and clicks login, what we're doing on the back end is we're grabbing that email address, and then we're going ahead to call our create customer endpoint. And this endpoint is just calling the Paystack API to create a customer using that email address. This step is not it's not always necessary. So what happens is that, and we'll get to it when I show that endpoint later. But technically, anytime you initialize a transaction on Paystack, we will create a customer using that email address if it doesn't already exist. So technically, I could have skipped the step of creating a customer and just had that happen later. But I created the customer first here because I wanted to simulate storing the customer in our own database. So for the purpose of this app, I didn't set up a database because it's fairly simple. But what I did instead was just use local storage. And so once we create the customer, we're storing their email, the customer code. It's a unique identifier on the Paystack end for that customer, as well as the customer ID. It's also another unique identifier. Once we've stored all of that, we are then redirecting to our account page, which again, a bunch of boilerplate HTML in here, but we're going to go over to the account.js file because this is where all the magic is happening. So you can see here what we're doing is in line 5, we're attempting to fetch any subscriptions on Paystack for that customer. And again, we're filtering here for the plans that I hard coded. Just for the sake of this example, because we don't want to pull all the subscriptions that a given customer might have had on any other plans that we aren't concerned about right now. So we're fetching the subscriptions using the customer ID, and then we're getting their subscription. This returns an array, so we're just taking the first item off of the array. So next up, we check if subscription does actually exist. Then that means that this person has signed into our platform before and has already subscribed to one of our plans. So if that's true, then we go ahead and display the information that you saw on the screen just now. So hi, using our customer email, you're currently on this plan, this is your subscription status. And you can see I'm getting all of this information from the subscription object that was returned. So it has all the information that you will need to manage a particular customer's subscription. We also include the information about the card on file and the next payment date. If we had signed up with somebody who didn't have any plans, which is what I did in the first place, right? So I used the email address of somebody who had not signed up. That's where we display the plans and have them select one. So that's what you saw the first time, where we fetch the plans and then we display them. And this is all just creating HTML to display on the screen that shows the plan along with all the information on the plan. So you'll see here that I have, let me click into some of it, the plan name, plan currency and amount, a description of the plan, and the plan code. And then the customer can go ahead and subscribe. And when they hit subscribe, this function is what runs our sign up for plan function. And you'll see we're calling an endpoint that I will get into just in a bit. Initialize transaction with plan. We're passing the plan code along with the customer's email and along with the amount. Point to note here, so I'm passing an amount even though we set an amount on the plan code before. And this is just because we're using the initialize transaction endpoint. Because we're using that, we can append a plan code when we initialize the transaction, and the amount on that plan will actually override the amount that we're passing. So in my example, one of the plans that we had, the premium plan, was for 7,500 naira. So if I'm subscribing to that plan, it will override the 5,000 that we've passed in here, or 500, I suppose, actually, in this case, and charge us for the amount on the plan instead. So we've looked at some of the front-end code here. I'm now going to go to our backend, to our server, to show the endpoints that are actually being called and what's happening there. All right, so we're in the my server.js now. Everything is happening in here. You can see there's a bunch of setup I've done, and I've set up my Paystack's secret key so that I can call the API. I have my plan codes here. So remember, I said I hard coded them. So this is the code for the premium plan. This is the code for the basic plan, and those are the only two that we're displaying. All right, we'll walk through the endpoints here, and I'll just show what each one of them is doing. So get plans, that's I think the most recent one we looked at, actually. Let me go back to, that was account.js, right? Yes, so here we fetched our plans. Yeah, const plans equals await fetch plans. And so the endpoint it was calling is this one that we just looked at, this one right here. And what's going on is that we're calling Paystack, we're getting all our available plans, but then we are filtering the plans using the plan codes that we set at the top. So if I didn't actually do this, it would display all the plans that I have on my Paystack account at the moment. But we don't want to display all those plans here, so we're just filtering to show the ones that are relevant to us right now. All right, next endpoint is our subscription endpoint. And so this endpoint is fetching fetching the customer's subscriptions. So you can see here that we've said let customer equals rec.query. So we're fetching the customer from the query parameters, and then we are using that to filter the subscriptions that we get from Paystack. So if I didn't pass this customer object here, then I would just get back all the subscriptions on my account. But we're filtering using the customer, which is the customer ID. Once we've done that, we can then pass back the subscriptions. Also note here that I'm passing back, I'm filtering for subscriptions with a status of either active or non-renewing. This will make a little more sense once we start discussing subscription statuses, but basically these are the two that I care about. These two statuses indicate that a subscription is not complete yet. And so those are the ones that we're interested in seeing right now. All right, so that's our subscription endpoint. We have a few more. Let me just get to the ones that matter right now. Initialize transaction with plan. So I spoke about this one already. I'm going to talk about this and then talk about create subscription, because these two show the two different ways that you can actually create your subscriptions using Paystack. So for the first one, initialize transaction with plan. As the name implies, we're using the initialize transaction endpoint on Paystack. So if you remember the Postman example from before, that first endpoint that I called, that was api.paystack.co/transaction/initialize. That's the endpoint that we're calling here. We are passing the email, amount, and plan. Normally, you just need the email and amount to actually initialize a transaction. But what happens here is that when we pass plan as well, we are telling Paystack that I want you to override the amount that's being passed with this, the amount that's on this plan. And when this when this transaction is complete, I want you to subscribe the customer, the person that's paying on this transaction, to the plan that I specified. So this is a really, I guess, simple way to subscribe customers to your plans. You're going to need to collect payment from them at some point anyways. Why not just subscribe them to the plan at the point that you're collecting payment? So this bundles everything together. Once the payment is made, your customer is now subscribed to that plan. This is what I mentioned earlier, where I said I was specifying the payment channels that should show on my checkout. You can see I'm only passing card. There's some other options that you could pass here. So we have QR, bank transfer. It will vary depending on the country that you're in. If you're in Ghana, mobile money is another option that you can pass. If you're in South Africa, EFT is another option that you can pass. But like we've said, for recurring payments, we will want to pass card only because that's the only available payment channel for recurring payments at the moment. All right, so we initialize our transaction and we pass back the response. And then on the front end, I'm loading that authorization URL and using that to complete the transaction. So that's what we're using in our app. But technically, there is another way that we could create subscriptions. And that's what we have in this create subscription endpoint. So I've written it here so that I can explain it, but we're not actually using it in the application at the moment. I will, however, explain how you might want to use this in the future. With the create subscription endpoint, you just pass the customer, the plan, the authorization, and the start date. So a few different parameters than you would use with the initialized transaction endpoint. For this endpoint, customer here is the customer code, so that identifies what customer do I want to subscribe to this plan. Plan specifies obviously the plan that you want to subscribe the customer to. Authorization here is so we've talked about the authorization code already, and we talked about how that's what we're using under the hood for subscriptions, that we're using the charge authorization and the recurring payments bit that we talked about in the beginning is what we're using for this as well. So authorization here will be any auth code that you have for a customer that you want to use to subscribe them to a plan. As we noticed earlier, you get the authorization after you have successfully charged a customer, which is why we are not using it in our sample app at the moment. Because if you sign up with an email that does not match any customer on my Paystack integration, then I actually have no authorization that I can use to create a subscription for you. So in order to be able to use this endpoint, you need to be using it with a customer who has previously done a transaction on your integration so that you can pass the relevant authorization for that customer. And then last but not least, we're passing a start date parameter. It's not mandatory, but in the event that you want to specify when billing should actually begin for this customer, then the start date is a very handy parameter to use. So imagine you want to implement free trials for your customers, for example, where I can sign up today and then I get maybe my first month free or my first 2 weeks free or something like that. Then you can create a subscription using this endpoint. Again, given that your customer has previously done a transaction on your integration, you can use this endpoint, pass all that information, and then set a start date that is in the future, such that that customer does not get billed at that date. Oftentimes, you will want to offer a free trial, but you may also have people signing up who have not previously done transactions on your integration. So how would you account for that? Well, what you can choose to do is get the authorization code using the initialized transaction endpoint like we saw before, but just charge your customer a very, very small amount and then immediately refund that amount to them. And we'll actually see somewhere else where we're using this feature very soon. But yeah, so that gives you the ability to implement free trials. So the flow there would be charge a customer very small amount, so you can tokenize the card, refund them for that amount, or you can choose to maybe take that amount out of the however much you're charging them later on for the subscription. So refund that amount and then create a subscription using the authorization that you now have and set the start date at a point in the future. All right, so we've covered all the endpoints that we're using currently. I will come back to some of these other endpoints, but we haven't really covered what they're being used for yet. So let's jump back over to Livestorm. Oh, sorry, Michael, I'm just seeing your message saying that you couldn't see my screen. Is anyone else having this issue? Can anyone else not see the screen, or are we all, is Michael the only one who seems to be having this issue? Or is it that you can't see the screen, or is it's not, I need to zoom in? Oh, okay, Mustafa says you can see. Okay, good. Okay, zoom in. All right. Yeah, let's go ahead and zoom in. Hopefully, we're still able to follow with most of what I was saying. But let me just leave that zoomed so that as we go on, it will be good. Is that better? Can someone in the chat just indicate if it's much easier to see now? Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, so let's go back now to our application. So one moment. I'm going to switch screens yet again. It's so much fun. All right. So this is where we were when I left off. And let me just zoom in here as well, just in case. And yeah, so this was our account dashboard where we can view the plan that we're currently on, and we can see some other information about the card on file and when our next payment date is. We have this link here, which is manage subscription. So I'm going to go to that now. This is something that we added relatively recently. Depends on how wide your time frame of relative is. But this is actually a hosted page by Paystack that lets you manage a couple of things about your subscription. So here, I think I need to actually switch because it opened up in a different tab. So sorry, give me a moment. All right, and it is subscriptions. All right, here we go. All right, so this is the page that opened up when I clicked on manage your subscription. And so, like I said, this is a hosted page by Paystack where you can manage the card on a subscription. You can see this is my email here. It shows that my subscription is active, and then you can see the card that I have on this subscription at the moment. And then I have two options here. I can either replace the card or I can cancel the subscription. So let's say I had a payment issue with my last last month. I was supposed to be billed, but there was some kind of issue because my card has expired, or I reported my card stolen or lost, or for some reason that card can no longer be charged. All I need to do then is come to this page, and I can actually replace the card that I have on the subscription. So let's go ahead and actually replace card here. That seems to have frozen. Let's see if we have any issues. Oh, it looks like there's an error from inline. Let's refresh. Replace card. Oh, okay, we're getting an error, invalid transaction parameters. Interesting. First name, last name. I see it might be, I think this is trying to pass first name and last name for the customer that I am I'm trying to replace a card for, but because I don't have that information, it's throwing an error. So let's see, I'm going to go over to my dashboard. I'm sorry, I know that it's not showing all my screens. Let me actually just change this to share the whole window, and maybe I won't need to switch between as often. Oh, wow. Okay. I'm just not going to come back to the live storm tab for the time being. Okay, so let's look up my customers and let's see if we can fix this error. I'm just going to come in here and add a customer name. Okay, that's done. I'm going to come back here. Let's refresh this and now see if I can successfully update my card. Replace card, and voila. Interesting. That's my first time running into that error. So I think that's something to highlight to the team. Ideally, I think you should be able to replace your card even if you haven't entered a first name and last name. But not to worry. So you can see, like I said, we're charging a very, very small amount here. And so what's happening behind the scenes is that we're going to charge this new card that, or Paystack is going to charge this new card that I'm paying with, and charge it 50 Naira. Once it's complete, in the background, Paystack will issue a refund for that 50 Naira. Obviously, this is test, so none of that happens But you can even see we provide a little message here that says, whenever you add a new card, we'll charge a tiny amount to authorize the card, which will be refunded immediately. So let's choose a different method, just so that we can see. Actually, let me grab one of the test cards from the documentation. All right, we have bank auth simulation and we know it's reusable. So I'm going to grab this, put that in here, get the expiry and the CVV. Okay, so I can go ahead and make that payment now. It will ask me to authenticate, but it's marked that it was successful. And you'll now see there's a new card. The last one ended in 4081, but now I have a card that ends in 0409. And if we go back to our account dashboard, if I refresh this, we should see that the card on file changes. So let's try that out. Yes, and you can see now it's 0409. So we've successfully updated the card on my subscription. Another thing you can do here is cancel your subscription. And so I have an endpoint for this. We're not using it because we're using the hosted page, but I'll still walk you through how that works in case you want to handle canceling of subscriptions on your own. So I click cancel subscription, confirm that I want to cancel it, and it will show here that my subscription has been canceled. However, if we go back here, just watch the status field. It should update to non-renewing. And so, like I said, we'll go over the statuses. But very quickly, non-renewing implies that this subscription is still active, but it will not renew at the next payment date. So you'll also notice the next payment date now has reverted to epoch time. And that's because there is no next payment date anymore, because the subscription has been canceled and we're not expecting it to, you're not going to have to make a subsequent payment. So null would have been returned by the API, but I think because I'm attempting to convert that null into a date, that's why you see this instead. But ideally, it should just say that there's no next payment date. All right, I'm going to switch back over to the app. So let's stop sharing. I'm going to switch back over to the app just to go over the cancel subscription endpoint, just so that we can see how that works as well. All right. Okay, so we're back here and you can see I have my cancel subscription endpoint here. And there are two parameters that endpoint actually takes. So the cancel subscription that we saw from the hosted page, it's the same logic that's happening here, that's happening with that endpoint. It's using the same endpoint. And so you pass the code, which is the code for the subscription that you want to cancel, and then this token parameter. And so token here is it's an token that signifies the email address that was used when creating that subscription. And so it's another parameter that gets passed when you fetch a subscription, it's passed in the body that's returned by Paystack. So these are the two parameters that you use. You pass them to Paystack to disable the subscription, and it will set the status of the subscription to non-renewing, meaning that it will not renew at the next date. Let's see if we have anything else. Update payment method. This is the endpoint that I'm using to redirect us to the hosted payment page. We've provided an endpoint that you can call to get a link to that payment page that I just showed. So imagine if you wanted to, if you had you're managing your subscriptions via your own dashboard, your own platform within your app. You can then just make a call to the Paystack API to get a link to that page so you can redirect your customers there to complete their payment. There's another endpoint that we're not using here, which allows you to actually email that link to your customers. So if your setup is not, the first scenario I described is like customer logs into their dashboard, they have a page where they can manage their subscriptions, and then they can click a link that will take them to the hosted page. But if you, as the merchant, want to prompt a customer proactively to update the card on their subscription, then you can actually generate that code and have Paystack send out an email to that customer on your behalf. All right, so we've covered that endpoint. And now I think we'll go to subscription statuses before we talk about handling the webhook events and managing your subscriptions that way. So I'm going to take us back to the documentation for this, and we'll take a look at our various subscription statuses. So let me share that screen again. Share this window. Sorry about this. Okay. All right. So our subscription statuses. I'm covering this since we've gotten into that a bit. So we'll go over this and then we'll talk about the subscription events. But at the moment, there are 5 potential statuses that your subscriptions on Paystack can have. Active is the first one that we saw, and active just indicates that yes, this subscription is currently active, and on its next payment date, Paystack will attempt to charge the card on the subscription. So active is healthy, everything is great with your subscriptions. Non-renewing is the second status that we saw. And so what that means is the subscription is active right now, but as of the next payment date, it will no longer be active. So using our example again, today is August 2nd. I subscribed to the plan, to a monthly plan on August 2nd, meaning that my next payment date should be September 2nd. But then I went ahead and canceled the plan on August 2nd as well. However, if I've already subscribed for the month, I've already made my payment for the month, so I should still have access to whatever content, whatever goods, whatever services my subscription gets me for the rest of the month. So that's what non-renewing is meant to indicate. It's basically saying this subscription, in the case of our example, this subscription will be active until September 2nd, at which point we will not renew it, we will not attempt to charge the subscription. So ideally, that is the point that you should stop providing whatever value you're providing to your customer. The next status we'll want to look at is attention. So as the name suggests, you want to pay attention to this one. Attention, a subscription will move into the status of attention once there's an issue accepting payments. So the subscription is active. However, we've tried to charge the card for this subscription, but there was an issue. So it could be that the card is expired, there's insufficient funds, or some other card-related issue, some issue when attempting to charge the card on that subscription. What this does, moving the subscription to the status of attention, is that it lets you, as the merchant, know that you need to proactively reach out to this customer to either get them to update their card or figure out why their subscription is in this status of attention, and prompt them to take the action necessary to resolve it so that they can continue receiving value for their subscription. Completed means that you've completed a subscription and it will no longer be charged. And then canceled, the subscription has been canceled and we will no longer attempt to charge the card on the subscription. Very quickly, touching on attention again, and still sticking with the docs. I mentioned that there will be an issue related to why Paystack was unable to charge the card, and you will need to do something about that. But how do you know what the issue was and what to do about it? Well, you can look at the most recent invoice object that is returned when you fetch a subscription from the Paystack API. This object will contain a field, and let me see if I can find it here. So you can see status is attention, and then there is a description field here that says insufficient funds. So in this example, I know that, okay, this customer, the card that they have on file has insufficient funds. It's possible that all I need to do is reach out to them and say, hey, we were unable to charge the card due to insufficient funds. Please, ensure that by the next charge date, the card has enough funds to cover this subscription. Yeah, okay, cool. So that's our subscription statuses. And now we'll take a step back and look at the subscription events, which help us manage the subscription lifecycle. So earlier, what we talked about webhooks very, very briefly. But in case you aren't familiar with webhooks, they're basically events that Paystack is sending you to let you know of activity on your integration. So charge.success for when somebody has successfully completed a transaction. subscription.create for when a subscription has been successfully created. So listening to these events lets you take actions on your own platform according to what has happened. So for example, if I receive a subscription.create event, then I know, okay, cool, a subscription has been created on Paystack for a customer. Maybe I now need to provision something on their account on my own platform or something like that. But listening for that event lets me do that. So from your Paystack dashboard, you can set your webhook URL. If you go to API keys and webhooks, you can set your webhook URL here. That's the endpoint that Paystack will call to share any information about things that have happened on your integration. So very quickly, we'll go through this table. It talks about all the events that Paystack will send for a subscription and what they can be used for. So the very first one, a subscription.create event. So once you've created your subscription, you will receive this event at your webhook URL. Oh, do I need to zoom in? Let me make sure I zoom in on this so everybody can see. All right. So a subscription.create event will be sent to you to indicate that a subscription has been created. And then if you use the endpoint that we used in our application, the event that will be sent to you is a charge.success event. So that indicates that the transaction was successful. And then, so those are the steps for the very first time we subscribe to a plan. But then Paystack will subsequently send events around your billing cycle. So if you have a weekly subscription, you should expect to get more subscription related events weekly for any given subscription. If you have a monthly subscription, you should expect to get events monthly, and so on. So here we can see that for each subsequent billing cycle, you should get an invoice.create event. This implies that, or this lets you know that a subscription's next payment date is coming up, and Paystack has created an invoice to charge that customer for the subscription. So in the case of weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly subscriptions, you should get this 3 days before the next payment date. We do offer hourly subscriptions as well on Paystack, but as you can imagine, we can't send you an invoice.create events 3 days before for an hourly subscription. So if you're testing with an hourly subscription and you don't see the invoice create event, then that's why. Okay, so that's sent 3 days before the next payment date. And then on the actual next payment date, you should receive a charge.success event in the event that we were able to successfully charge the customer's card. If we attempted to charge them and the charge failed, then you should receive an invoice.payment failed event with more information about the attempted charge and why it failed. After that, you get an invoice update event, which just lets you know we attempted to charge for one of your subscriptions, and this is basically what happened. So if it was successful, you get an invoice.update event letting you know that, yes, we successfully charged the card on the subscription. If it was unsuccessful, then you'll get the invoice payment failed. Canceling a subscription also has its own events. So remember when we canceled our subscription just now, we refreshed the page and we saw that we had a status of non-renewing. When that happens, you will also get a webhook event, subscription.not renew. And that's meant to indicate that, hey, you have a subscription that we are not going to attempt to charge at the next payment date. And then on the next payment date for that subscription, so using our example again, we canceled our subscription that we should have been billed for on September 2nd. When we canceled it, we would have received a subscription.not renew event. That's very difficult to say. And then on September 2nd, I will then receive another event letting me know that that subscription that we said we weren't going to renew, we've actually gone ahead to disable it. So that will get sent to me on September 2nd in this case. If I didn't cancel though, and say I had set my subscription to run for 2 months, then at the end of 2 months, I would receive a final subscription.disable event with its status set to complete. So that's just letting me know that, hey, this subscription has been disabled, but it's being disabled because it's complete. All payments have been made. And so if you check out the docs, we have samples of what all of these events look like. So this is invoice create. This is invoice failed. So invoice.payment failed. Invoice updated is here as well. Subscription created has all the information that we talked about. So this is the next payment date that we talked about. This is information about the plan that it's on, and so on. And then we've got subscription disabled. So this is an example of an event that's sent at the end of a subscription, because you can see status here is complete. So this one was disabled because it had been completed. This is what the subscription not renewing looks like. So you can see here status is set to not renewing. It lets me know that this subscription will not be renewed on the next payment date. And you can see here next payment date has been set to null because there's no longer a next payment date. And then transaction successful. So charge.success, like we said, you'll receive this on the first payment, and you should receive it for subsequent successful payments as well. All right. Let me switch back over to Livestorm. There we go. Sorry about this. Let me stop the share. Screens on screens on screens. Awesome. Okay. All right. So we've covered a lot, but hopefully I didn't lose you guys along the way. But just to kind of recap on everything that we've covered, recurring payments are a great way for you as a merchant to collect monthly recurring revenue from your customers. They allow you to capture a card's payment details such that you can perform subsequent charges on that card without the customer needing to re-enter their card details. This is done on Paystack via the Charge Authorization endpoint, and that is the same endpoint that powers our subscriptions billing platform. And with subscriptions, the difference is that at the onset, you get to set an interval for how often you would like to collect. You can also set how long you would like to collect from a given customer on that plan. Paystack will then take care of performing the recurring billing month on month, week on week, quarter on quarter, whatever interval that you've set for your subscriptions. And all you have to do is listen for subscription events so that you know when any of your subscriptions are in danger of not collecting that month or the next month, and so that you know when and for how long to continue delivering service to your customers. Awesome. Okay, so that being said, we can throw it open to Q&A now. I'm not sure if many questions came in via the chat, but I can see that we have at least one. So let me start live answer on this one. So yes, Michael asked, do recurring payments work outside of Nigeria, for example, in Ghana or South Africa or Europe? So yes, our recurring payments are available in any country that Paystack is live in. So you can recurring payments are available in Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. Not available in Europe, but just because you can't, Paystack is not operating in Europe. But yes, for Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa, you can perform recurring payments. At the moment, it is just on cards, though. We are looking to expand this, though. I know at least for Ghana, we would love to be able to offer recurring payments for mobile money as well. And I know this is something that our product team has been working on. Awesome. Hope that answers the question, Michael. I'll go over to the chat in case there are any questions there I missed. Okay, I see Ruben had a question, but Andrew has already responded to that. Are there any other previous questions I might have missed? Doesn't look like it. Okay, got another question from Vusi. Okay, I might need you to actually clarify what you mean here, Vusi. So Vusi asked, how do I integrate this in a PayPoint device? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by a PayPoint device. So maybe if you could in the chat just kind of explain what you mean by PayPoint device, then I can go ahead and answer live. If not, you can email us at the email address Andrew shared in his last message in the chat, and then we can continue the conversation there. But if I'm going to try and answer, given that everything here happens via the API, as long as the device that you're referring to is able to communicate with the API, then you'd be able to implement subscriptions as well. You would just need a server that is helping you communicate with the Paystack API to initialize transactions, create subscriptions, manage your customers, all of that. But as long as your device can communicate with that server, then any device you should be able to use this with. All right, we've got another question. So Vusi, I'll be on the lookout in the chat for more on that question so I can take it. I'm just going to bring this other question that we have up now. So this is from Ruben. So apart from payment gateways, do you develop multiple vendor e-commerce websites? Again, not sure I fully understand what exactly you mean by this question, but I'll do my best to answer it anyways. So I mean, our core offering is the payment gateway, but we do have several third-party integrations that enable you to integrate that payment gateway into your websites or your web apps. So if you're talking about vendor e-commerce, for example, I think for WordPress, there's at least one platform. I'm not sure if it's WC Vendors, one or two platforms that supports like vendor payouts with Paystack or a vendor type solution with Paystack. Paystack itself, though, just provides the infrastructure and the tooling and everything that you would use to then go ahead and build a multiple vendor e-commerce website. So we have APIs that you can use for that directly, actually. We offer split payments on Paystack. So what that lets you do is as a payment comes in, you can split it across your payout account and multiple other accounts as well. So imagine if you had vendors, you could have your vendors sign up and then you create an account for each vendor. And then when transactions come in to Paystack, you split the transaction amongst those vendors. You can also choose to use our transfers product, which lets you, so people pay into your account, you add your vendors as transfer recipients on your Paystack account, and then on your own schedule, you can then choose to pay them out as you see fit. I hope that answers the question, Ruben, but in case it doesn't, please just let me know in the chat. All right, okay, Vusi said, so card machine to enable a customer to tap their card to initiate a charge for a buy now, pay later service / product. Okay. So yes, so like I said, we are just providing the APIs that a lot of these devices can plug into. So for example, in Nigeria, we are working on our own physical terminal devices that let you you can get like a terminal device or a POS and conduct card transactions through it. But you can also connect that to the API such that if you wanted to initialize a subscription for a customer that's paying via your POS device, then yes, that's possible. You could initialize the subscription via the payments that they're making on the POS device. I hope that answers that question. Okay, and Ruben, one more question. Let me bring this up again. Is Paystack pay within 24 hours? If yes, can it be reduced? So yeah, we have different payout schedules for the different countries actually. So if you're in Nigeria, it's T+1. In South Africa, I believe at the moment it's T+3, and in Ghana T+2. In Nigeria, so that's like the default setting. In at least Nigeria, I believe it is possible, and you'll need to reach out to our sales team about this. But again, you can reach out to us, and we'll put you in touch with them. It is possible to enable manual payouts, and that is a process that lets you essentially get access to the money quicker, where we pay the money out into your Paystack balance, and from there you can go ahead and transfer it to another account. So that's a way that you can do that. Yeah. Okay, Ruben's got one more question. I'm going to have to call it after this, Ruben, because I think we've actually gone a bit over time, but let me just take this last one. And then any other questions that you have, like Andrew said, just email us at techsupport@paystack.com so that we can take them. But percentage of commission charged on transactions. So I'll drop a link now to our pricing page. A lot of this information can be found on the website actually. And so here, let me drop that in the chat. So yes, we have different pricing for different markets. So Ruben, I'm actually not sure what country you are joining us from. So I would suggest just going to the page so that you can toggle between the different countries and see the pricing. For Nigeria, it's 1.5% plus 100 naira. For South Africa, it's 2.9% plus 1 rand. For Ghana, it's 1.95% flat. So check out the pricing page. There'll be more information there that you can get. Okay, I just see you say you're calling it from Ghana. So yeah, Ghana 1.95%. Yeah, awesome, fantastic. Thanks for all the questions at the end. Really enjoyed the engagement. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this session today. Like I said, my name is Tolu. I'm with the developer relations team at Paystack, and we're always happy to answer any questions that you might have around integration, any issues that you might be running into. We actually have developer office hours this coming Thursday. So if you haven't already signed up for those, but you do have questions, technical questions about integration with Paystack, a member of the developer relations team can help you out with that. Andrew, if you could you please share a link in the chat to where people can sign up for that very quickly? And yeah, thank you all for joining. Really, really enjoyed doing this. Our developer workshops happen once a month, and there'll be a different topic for each session. So I encourage you all to join us next month for the next session. And again, join us on Thursday for developer office hours if you have any technical questions that you could use some help with. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day wherever you are. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you in the next session. Awesome.